Hey there guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys, yet again with your host and friendly neighborhood far-right thug, and recently blocked by the leader of Plaid Cymru, Mr. George Cresswell. So yeah, that's something I found out today as I was recording this episode before. Scuppered that recording because it wasn't very good. So I'm going to redo the focus a little bit and just focus on one issue just to make sure I get this episode out on time before we go talking about some of the other things, namely a bombshell interview that came out recently with the leader of Plaid Cymru and some of the other initiatives that they are planning on putting in, which people need to know about. But the number one story at the moment, which is indicative of things that are going on in the world at the moment, with us getting our hopes up for political change, and it's something that was exemplified as well in a recent interview which I had, which I'll play a little bit of that for you now. It's coming out on Monday, literally 48 hours. Literally 48 hours from now, time of recording. So, the Epstein files, hot on everyone's lips at the moment. Just been told basically they don't exist. There is no client list. There is no, unscrupulous things going on. Ghislaine Maxwell, or Ghislaine Maxwell, however you say it, was trafficking young girls to no one. So we're being told now that this is supposedly a victimless crime. The biggest stain on the Trump administration at the moment is this issue. And make no mistake, people are reacting very negatively to it, and rightfully so. And Trump admin, Trump himself, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, all of these people, they're getting rightfully pilloried, in my opinion, and leaving people without hope in many instances that we're not actually going to get justice for the people that done these horrific things on Little St. James. So we're going to go over some things that have recently developed on that front at the moment, and maybe one or two things later on that I want to get into, which really, again, disgusting things that should get you very, very angry at our government, both at the devolved level of Wales and at the level of the UK. So, recently though, ladies and gentlemen, I had a conversation with another NHS whistleblower. She's an ex-child psychiatrist by the name of Mrs. Lisa Peregrine. She runs an organisation, or runs a movement called Do No Harm Wales, and runs a couple of campaigns, namely the Speak Up campaign, which is meant to help whistleblowers come forward. She runs a couple of whistleblower support groups and all of these things. I was put in touch with her off the back of one of my previous podcast guests, and this is an insight into what that conversation was like. This doesn't even scratch the surface of some of the things that we talked about. Deliberately left some things out of the trailer because I don't want them to be showcased, before people actually go and listen to that. Lisa has been treated very, very poorly by the system, as is always the case with whistleblowers. You have my interview with Victoria Rickson to go and listen to or watch. You have my conversation with Justine Winter as well to go and listen to and watch. And now you have Lisa Peregrine, as I will show you or play for you the trailer for that now, or the montage clip that I always put up before these interviews go live. It's coming out on Monday, the 14th of July at 6 p.m. GMT. So here's a little taste of that conversation, ladies and gentlemen.
Child psychiatry is very, very poorly funded. And it always appeared that when we needed to save money, or when the government needed to save money, children's services were the first ones to be hit.
Mentioned the ramifications of this particular incident. It could have been fatal. If this wasn't dealt with urgently, it could have been fatal. Am I right saying that? I
am just very, very grateful to God that it wasn't fatal. It in other cases it would have been fatal. Yeah, our teams were getting smaller, our patches were getting bigger. And for a long time, we just absorbed it. And then we had a new director who decided to change everything.
You mentioned the wording of the emails was changed. So what happened with these emails?
I was asked to inform a local school that there was a potential security incident. The email that I had sent the school had been altered, and to say, you obviously I would want you to...
Would I be right saying they were having a detrimental effect, in your opinion, all of these changes that were being brought in?
Yeah, absolutely.
All of this resulted in your DBS being removed. And obviously that has a lot of unspoken things as well, especially when you're dealing with children.
We actually got our 10-point plan into one of the health acts. on the advice page. But unfortunately, the Welsh Government completely ignores virtually everything.
We have a little joke in my community, for example, of, oh yeah, you never see our MP unless there's some kind of photo op going on.
We have a saying amongst whistleblowers is that he who pays the piper calls the tune, and that is so true.
You are hopeful in any way for the next year, maybe, that people will, that whatever next government's coming in will actually want to take these things seriously?
If I'm absolutely honest, no.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's an insight as to what's coming out next Monday. As mentioned, there's a lot of things in there that didn't make the cut. And there were some things in there that are really, really shocking. But I wanted to leave them out just to not give any of that stuff away until people actually go and watch the full conversation. So that's coming out next Monday, the 14th of July at 6 p.m. Greenwich Median Time. So, as I mentioned, we're going to get into now, you heard a big thing there, which is part of the conversation. It comes in towards the end of the conversation, not to spoil anything. Pardon me. A distinct lack of hope. A distinct lack of hope of anything to do with the Welsh Government in particular, of taking on these changes that Lisa wanted to see, for example, with her 10-point plan. You can go and find out what all that is when the interview comes out. Having no faith in the political system. And that's what a lot of people, our American friends, are feeling at the moment. With a recent press conference that was attended by Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Pam Bondi, et al., where the question about Epstein came up. And Trump exhibited a very weird reaction. Given that in some instances, he made Epstein, the issue around Epstein, a key part of his campaign. Pardon me. As you know, they said that they are the most transparent administration in history. Literally on the files that were given to those conservative influencers like DC Drano, Libs of TikTok, I believe Liz Wheeler and Jack Posobiec and all those guys, who, being charitable to a lot of them, I think they were taken in by a lot of this. It was turned into a photo op in some instances by opportune timing, given that Keir Starmer was making his appearance at the White House as well. So obviously there's going to be a lot of press outside. But on the binders that they were given, which ironically were less transparent than what is already available in the public sphere. So these binders that they were given says Epstein Files Phase 1, I believe they were called. Literally says on the bottom of them, just below Kash Patel and Pam Bondi's names, the most transparent administration in history. Now, Kash Patel in particular said that on day one we were going to have the Epstein Files. We were going to have the names of people that done these awful things to kids on Little St. James. And as you know, it's distinctly not day one anymore. And still nothing's been done. And in some instances, a really worrying thing that himself and Dan Bongino have seemingly committed to the establishment narrative now that they were so critical of for so long. It makes you wonder why. Something happened. They decided to change tack now that they got their position. Have they got the gun to the back of their head? Who knows, right? Who knows? But this issue is not going away. This issue is not going away. Funny thing happened recently at a I don't think it was a Turning Point event, but it was an event that was attended by Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk. There's about 7,000 people there. It might have been the recent TPUSA event. I'm not 100% sure. Charlie actually asked the crowd. In fact, I'm going to see, before I show you this, I'm going to see if I can find the interview. Sorry, not the interview, the clip. I believe I've got it by here. Yeah, so this is from the War Room, Steve Bannon's War Room. And actually is this the right clip? I'm not actually sure if this is the... Let me see if I can find the right clip a minute. Let me see if I can find the right clip. Because they were speaking to a room of about 7,000 people, I believe it was. So they were speaking to a crowd of about 7,000 people. And they asked this crowd if the Epstein issue was a big issue to them. And I just want to see if this is the right clip. I don't think this is either. I can't find the clip. Oh well, never mind. Charlie Kirk, I believe it is, asks the crowd of 7,000 people. So I'm going to stop, rambling now, because I realize that, there's only so much listening capacity and watching capacity that people have just to hear me look at my screen and say absolutely nothing. As this crowd of 7,000, is the Epstein issue important to you? And then you literally hear one of them say, whichever one it is, everybody's hand has just gone up. So you're talking 7,000 people. And it shows now a disconnect seemingly between the president and people that elected him, because he seems to be very laid back and even slightly antagonistic towards this issue now that it's him in the seat of responsibility for deciding what happens with this issue going forward now. Whether he does the same thing as the previous administrations that have covered for Jeffrey Epstein and his activities, whether it's because he was blackmailing important individuals and he was linked to intelligence. There's allegations that he was linked to the Mossad in Israel. There's allegations that he's linked to the FBI and the CIA. I've even seen some people allege that he's linked to MI6. So he's going to protect these powerful people, very powerful people, that have done heinous, disgusting things to children on this island as part of this massive sex trafficking operation to no one? Or is he actually going to break it and give the people what they want and let us know who was doing it? In a recent press conference, he was very antagonistic about it, which left a lot of his base with a very, very bad taste in their mouth. Here's what he had to say when a reporter asked about the Jeffrey Epstein situation.
Yeah, sure.
Could I just interrupt for a second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure.
I think people will argue it's more of a desecration to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein that Trump has taken this very antagonistic and combative approach when people are asking very, very good questions about what's going to be happening with these files. But all of the lies that we've secretly been told, not only the decades of lies that we've been told, but even just the lies by people in his administration about this issue. And the people, either it's because of Bondi or it's because of whatever other system is going on behind the scenes, have been made to look very, very untrustworthy and have made him look very untrustworthy. But with these remarks, he can blame nobody but himself. And I say this as a person who was very excited when Trump got in and certainly agrees that he was better than the alternative. He was much better than the alternative. And as far as the other things have gone, for the most part, he's done very well. I think he's done quite well for the most part on the foreign policy front. I think his domestic agenda seems to be working. Obviously caused a slight panic initially with all the tariff agreements and stuff like that. But the things that he seems to be looking for that are going to benefit America, and I had this conversation all the whole time while I'd be like, well, Donald Trump is not the leader of the UK. So what does it matter if whatever he does affects the UK in a negative capacity? He's not the leader of the UK. So the UK is not necessarily his concern, right? And for the most part, it seems that the rest of it is going pretty well. It's going pretty well. America, for the most part, certainly has a swagger and its confidence back. And a strong America, a strong West is good for the world. Make no mistake about it. A strong Western entity. Obviously, you have America, but then you also have, well, as soon as we take the country back, you'll have Britain and you'll have the other European countries as well. You have Hungary and Poland, for example, that are very, very strong in keeping their people secure, their country secure, and their faith secure. So for all of the stuff around this, I think the rest of it has gone particularly well, and it's certainly better than the alternative. Because with Kamala, for example, you wouldn't have got anything on Epstein. Definitely not. You would never have got anything on Epstein. You wouldn't have had any talk of peace at all in Ukraine. They would have kept it going. They would have kept funding Ukraine to the detriment of the American people. The war in the Middle East, forget about it. The war in the Middle East, absolutely forget about it. So Trump is certainly the better option that we had for America, certainly a better option America had, and certainly the better option that the world had. It tells you a lot when Putin recently got up on stage or at an event which he was at, or an event that he was at in Russia, some kind of big sort of press conference, and said that, I got to go now. He just got up out the chair. I got to go now. I don't want to keep President Trump waiting. And he had a phone call with President Trump or whatever, and he literally just left the stage being like, I don't want to keep him waiting, you know? So again, people, even world leaders that they said Trump was in bed with and all this, seem to be falling in line and at the very least respecting him, and you've got to be able to command respect if you want to get anywhere. But this shows a distinct lack of respect for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Absolutely. That people, yes, they are going to talk about it. They are going to talk about it because this is an issue that strikes right at the heart of everybody. Everybody has a son. Everybody has a daughter. Oh, well, not everybody has a daughter, but, you know, this is an issue that gets to the heart. It's, again, child innocence. It's the most vulnerable in some ways, other than babies, obviously, but children being taken advantage of by these disgusting, evil people in the most privileged positions in the world for their own disgusting, satanic ends, and it being covered up for decades. Victims have been silenced. Victims been silenced by the legal system, but now in many instances it's likely they've been silenced physically as well. So I'll never believe that Virginia killed herself. I'll never ever believe that, just like I never believe Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. But anyway, that every single person that said they're going to come in and solve the issue hasn't done it. And with every single time somebody's come in claiming to solve the issue, the resentment has only built. Optimism has built, and then resentment has built. And you're looking at about 20 years or more of resentment that is built now. So forgive people for being angry and wanting answers to this, Mr. President. You know, yeah, people are going to keep talking about it. This is arguably the most important issue that you have to face, that you have to deal with right now in many respects for your own credibility with your own voters and with your own people. Okay? Some people are suggesting that this is very much low on the priority list for Americans and for the world. It is not. It is not. Make no mistake about it. Child welfare and children being taken advantage of sexually by the most powerful people in the world and getting away with it, not spending a single day in prison or at the end of a fucking rope, is definitely an issue that strikes at the heart of many people, especially fathers and mothers, which many people are, most people are. So yeah, not a good look for President Trump. Massively unforced error. Literally, despite everything that's going on now, the tragedy that's happened in Texas, mind you, which some people aren't happy with, because even though in the deal that he negotiated with Ukraine, I believe that part of that deal was sending weapons to Ukraine in exchange for the minerals and stuff like that. People are angry at Trump at the moment, I think rather unfairly, because he's now sending weapons to Ukraine when Texas is still dealing with the problems that it has with the flood recently, which sadly claimed the lives, I think, of about 24 people, 25 people. If you've watched the video of how that river spread, by the way, how that river burst very quickly and spread, how far it spread as well, it was terrifying. It was terrifying how quick that happened. And God rest their souls. God rest. Especially, I know some of the victims were just, young girls and stuff like that. Truly, truly awful. And it was very, very... I saw an image on X, and I believe it was a picture of the mother of one of them. I believe she was interviewed having just lost her child, I believe it was. Might have been more than one child. I can't remember off the top of my head if she had more than one child and that the child was lost. But either way, she just lost the child in the flood, I believe. And she come back and circled around it. A lot of people would use this to discredit God, discredit Jesus, discredit Christianity, for example. Why would we let it happen? They'd be like, no, faith in Christ doesn't mean that you're not ever going to have tragedy or anything like that. Just means you don't have to walk through it alone. Just means you don't have to go through it alone. You go back to Psalm 23, for example, the Lord is my shepherd. And that's where the line comes from. It's actually Psalm 23 where that line comes from, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So, saying that it's not that tragedy's never going to happen. So the evil's never going to happen. It's by faith in Christ, you don't have to walk through it alone. You don't have to deal with it alone. Someone's always got your back. The most powerful the most powerful person, most powerful being in the universe has your back. How nice is that feeling, huh? So yeah, despite all that, you can still make the point of saying, oh yeah, we are dealing with it. You don't need to be so aggressive and antagonistic about this stuff. And it's one of the victims, one of the, again, people set up profiles and all of these things. You gotta be careful what you see on social media. But allegedly, this is one of the profiles that is run by one of the victims, is calling Trump out, very, very vehemently, and rightfully so. And rightfully so. Especially when this is an issue, as I said, that Trump campaigned on. At least for some part of it, right? Campaigned on tariffs, campaigned on his economic policy, his foreign policy, all of this stuff, right? Absolutely. Campaigned on ending the wars all across the world and not starting any new ones, right? Campaigned on being a peacemaker. But yet, is it going to come at the expense, seemingly, of the 1,000? Call him a creep, right? This is not just a creep. This is the most prolific pedophile in history. We're talking his victims, allegedly, in some instances, I've heard reports of numbering at about 1,000. We're not just talking one or two instances here. We're not just talking of it being an instance where a migrant in a park, for example, is eyeing up your kid, right? And being a bit creepy around your kid, right? We're not talking that. We're talking orders of magnitude above that. By the most powerful people, many of whom are likely in your contact list, Mr. President. At least in the court of public opinion, are already guilty, but it just matters that we get the confirmation of it now. But a letter came out recently saying there's not even any list. There's not even any list. So here's Pam Bondi, though, responding to that question, saying about what happened when she was interviewed by Fox, and we'll go over that clip as well. And then a damning document, which really, really throws her into disrepute here. But here's what Pam Bondi had to say off the back of Trump's, in my opinion, flagrant disrespect of Jeffrey Epstein's victims.
In February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also to the tens of thousands of videos.
Before she says that, why then would you use a singular term to describe that? If you're describing multiple things, so you're describing the Epstein client list or the file, you're describing the Epstein file, you're describing MLK, you're describing JFK, moon landing, all of these things in one singular thing, surely you would use the term they. And then the interviewer would likely ask you the question, what do you mean by they? And it'd be like, oh, well, I have all of these other things to go off of. But the interview that she's referring to, the Fox News interview, clearly asked about the client list in particular. And she said, it's waiting on my desk for my review. We'll give you that clip in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. But this next part, in my opinion, is just pure deflection. Because this next part is not something anybody ever asked for. And I can't help but think it's to get away from the true point of where people never wanted to know or see the things that went on Little St. James. They want to know who did it. But here's where Pam Bondi's focus goes in her next statement.
They turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was
the video, she's talking there, which I'll give you the video later on in this episode. At the moment, ladies and gentlemen, of the minute that is missing from the supposed footage outside Jeffrey Epstein's cell, or at least the entrance to his cell block, there's a minute of the footage that is missing. That video is edited. That video is edited. They did not wipe the metadata for that video, and it's extremely likely that that video was edited using Adobe Premiere Pro. I'll give you that in a little bit. So this is not looking good. This is not looking good for Pam Bondi at all. So she said, let's go through it. She said that she was referring to multiple things using a singular term when she was asked specifically about the Epstein client list, not even about the file, not about MLK, not about JFK, all of these things. She was asked specifically about the client list. She said, it's waiting on my desk for my review. Then she goes on about saying all of these things are child porn. It was never going to be released anyway. Yeah, nobody ever asked for that. Nobody ever asked for that. But if you have people verifying that these things were child porn, child rape material, again, I don't like the term child porn, it's child rape material, right? Because, you know, a child cannot consent to pornography in any manner, okay? A child cannot consent to this shit. So it's child rape, right? And it's child rape material, right? And if you have, as Pam Bondi has said in undercover recordings, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that, you know, there's thousands of these videos of them doing awful things to children, people never wanted to see that. People never asked to see the horrendous footage of what was going on and the images and stuff of what was going on Little St. James. People want to know who did it. They want the names. They want the identities. They want, basically, to have corroborated what they already know, what we already know. Because we know in large part who was flying the Lolita Express, right, in many instances. Know the names that were on there. We know the names of for example, as an example, the Israeli Prime Minister that met with Jeffrey Epstein about 36 times. But Prince Andrew that recently had the investigation into him dropped, right? You know, kind of fitting, really, after Kash Patel and Dan Bongino came out recently and said that, again, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. So, again, they traffic people to no one. She said about, Ghislaine Maxwell in one of her interviews, saying that she's right where she should be, but she's committed no crime. If this is true, she hasn't trafficked anybody because she trafficked people to whom? Who did she traffic people to? She trafficked people to no one. So, again, this is now being made up, basically, to somehow be a victimless crime. And, yeah, very different to what Pam Bondi was saying a little while ago. So Pam Bondi, this is the clip from Fox News that she's referencing here. She was asked specifically, I don't know the host's name, but she was asked specifically about the Epstein client list in this clip. And she says, it's on my desk waiting to review. And then goes on and says about the file, the MLK, JFK, all of this stuff, right? But she's asked specifically about the Epstein file and says, it's on my desk.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So,
one more time, ladies and gentlemen, one more time.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President.
Directive from President Trump. It's sitting on my desk waiting to review. It is sitting on my desk. And then goes on to say, well, I'm reviewing all of this other stuff, basically saying, without saying any words, but bear with me, right? Okay, a lot of us were giving her the benefit of the doubt up to this point. But a document recently came out as well, ladies and gentlemen, from the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, and the FBI. I'm going to read it to you now, and I'm going to show you the last part, because the last part is very telling indeed, that at some point in this administration, the supposed most transparent administration in history, someone has lied. Either they were lying before, or they're lying now. Because this is a letter that is not saying who it's addressed from. I can only assume that it is regarding, sorry, I'm just making sure my webcam's in focus at the moment. I can only assume that it is from this year, the Trump administration. So, I'm going to read from the second paragraph. Well, actually, it says here, to ensure that the review was thorough, the FBI conducted digital searches of its database, hard drives, and network drives, as well as physical searches of squad areas, locked cabinets, desks, closets, and other areas where responsive I think it says responsive material. Let me have a look. Yeah, where responsive material may have been stored. These searches uncovered a significant amount of material, including more than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence. So, this is where Pam Bondi, again, in that press conference, tried to make it so that people were asking to see all this stuff. We didn't want to see the horrific material, but one of the names. So files relating to Jeffrey Epstein include a large volume of images of Epstein, images and videos of victims who are either minors or appear to be minors, and over 10,000 downloaded videos and images of illegal child sex abuse material and other pornography. Teams of agents, analysts, attorneys, and privacy and civil liberties experts combed through the digital and documentary evidence with the aim of providing as much information as possible to the public whilst simultaneously protecting victims. That's an interesting one, because the files that were released, I think I said this before in this episode, or it was either in the last recording that I scuppered, that the files that Pam Bondi released, the influencers had, were more redacted than stuff that was already out there in the public domain. So that was quite interesting. They're being so transparent that they're trying to redact things that we already know. You know, it was quite interesting. There was a list of phone numbers and names that was already available in the public domain. You can go and find it on, you know, many journalistic outlets, and even if you just do a basic Google search, right, you can find this page was then redacted in the edition, the phase 1, quote-unquote, edition that was given to the influencers. So that was very, very interesting, that they're so transparent that they're trying to redact things that we already know. Very, very interesting. Much of the material is subject to court-ordered sealing. Only a fraction of this material would have been aired publicly had Epstein gone to trial, as the seal served only to protect victims and did not expose any additional third parties to allegations of illegal wrongdoing. Through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of these materials and will not permit the release of child pornography. I'm perfectly fine with not releasing child pornography. I'd be very weirded out if you did, as would many others. However, the key point to this document is, ladies and gentlemen, the last paragraph. The last paragraph, which will be on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. The systematic review revealed no incriminating client list, quote unquote. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. So what was on Pam Bondi's desk then? When she's asked about the Epstein client list, and she says, it's on my desk waiting to review, what was on her desk? So it's quite clear, ladies and gentlemen, either they lied before, or they're lying now. So it's either they never had any intention of releasing this stuff and they just campaigned on it, which is very likely true, and that's what's happening now anyway. And all of the stuff they were saying before about this being a cover-up and all of that stuff that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel were saying to advance their political agendas was never true. Or again, they're lying now to cover for these people, whether it's because they have a gun to the back of their head or something like that. So, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. And very, very depressing. Very, very depressing, because people like me actually got our hopes up and thought we were actually going to get answers. Thought we were actually going to get answers. How naive we were. How naive we were to think that things would be different. Do you know the thing that really leaves a bad taste in the mouth, though, ladies and gentlemen? The thing that really leaves a bad taste in the mouth is Pam Bondi believed before she was appointed to Attorney General, criticizing the previous Attorney General, Merrick Garland, for not releasing the files and for not being transparent. So now that she's in the position, she's doing the exact same thing. It's fine. When Merrick Garland was doing it before, Pam Bondi was on him like a rabid dog. And that should really leave a bad taste in the mouth, ladies and gentlemen. So you either die the hero or you do indeed live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I'm not sure when this is from. This video was put up on X in literally a day ago, literally yesterday. I'm not sure when this is from, but this is what Pam Bondi had to say in the past about the previous Attorney General in relation to the Epstein files.
I want to know why AG Garland and the Justice Department are so quiet on this tonight. You know, they're out there labeling parents domestic terrorists, yet they're saying nothing about this. And these documents were so slow to come out. Human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar business in this country, and Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for 20 years where she belongs. And if people in that report are still fighting to keep their names private, Sean, they have no legal basis to do so unless they're a child, a victim, or a cooperating defendant by some chance against some potential case against Ghislaine Maxwell. And I think Mark Garagos, as a great criminal defense attorney, will back that up as well.
So when it was politically advantageous for her questioning the previous Attorney General, which is well within their right to do, or well within her right to do, but again, doesn't leave a good taste in the mouth if you're just an American citizen or anybody who wants to know who the disgusting, often like Satan worshipping people were who were doing these heinous things on Jeffrey Epstein's island. So, yeah, really, really awful stuff. And it's very easy to see now why people are calling on, for example, Pam Bondi to resign. It's quite clear, although that, again, not trying to say that I could do a better job or anything like that, but it's quite clear, or at least at the moment, it seems quite clear that we're not going to get an answer with her. She's not going to be the one to come forward and tell the American people what really happened. She's not going to be the one to come forward and give people the truth. I can't help but think that, for example, if you had somebody like Matt Gaetz in there, that you wouldn't have had any of this. You wouldn't have had any of this with somebody like Matt Gaetz, I don't think. For all of the other things which you can disagree with him on, you know, I know he's quite a divisive character on things like Israel and foreign policy and all of these things, right? Had allegations against him himself, you know, all of these things. And obviously he removed himself from the running for Attorney General, I think, because of the allegations people were making against him at the time. He didn't want to harm Trump's campaign and any of that stuff. I can't but think that if you had somebody like Matt Gaetz, even if it's not Matt Gaetz himself, but somebody like Matt Gaetz who just has brass balls to do what's required, you wouldn't have had any of this stuff. You wouldn't have had Bindergate. You wouldn't have had things like this making you look like an embarrassment on the world stage. And not only that, that's really discredited Trump as a good leader on this issue and has really given a lot of unnecessary ammunition to his critics, at least to say to either bring up all the allegations that he's in the files, that he's been on Jeffrey Epstein's island doing all these horrendous things to kids, and that's why it's not coming out, that he's no better than any of the others. It's just given so much unnecessary ammunition to his detractors. And has really, really, if this doesn't get sorted, people are not going to forget it in 2028. People are not going to forget it in 2028. And you got to think it would be the biggest, I think, one of the biggest downfalls in political history in America for, you know, the Republicans for the first time in 20 years to go from, you know, to win the popular vote, to win historically with, I think, black Americans, to win historically with women, typically married women, as you know, single liberal women, nuttier than squirrel shit. So again, they're not going to vote for Trump or anything like that. So again, people are not going to forget this in 2028. People are not going to forget this. This will be the biggest betrayal that people will have seen, because you guys really came in. People really rallied behind you, thinking that they were going to get answers to this issue, thinking that you guys were going to do what's required. When you said you were going to, this is Kash Patel, for example, saying you were going to release these documents on day one. Okay, you were going to release them on day one. That you were going to turn the FBI headquarters in New York into a museum. People are not going to forget that. People are not going to forget how much they were gaslit, how much faith that they put in you, and how much shit you kicked back in their face. And they will remember it when it comes to the next election. They will remember it when it comes to 2028. Even J.D. Vance in the past made remarks saying that, oh yeah, we really need to release the list and stuff like that. And he seems to be oddly quiet at the moment. It's kind of funny again how, you know, Diddy and Epstein basically got acquitted in the same week. Well, this is the post that J.D. Vance made in 2021, for example. Remember when we learned that our wealthiest and most powerful people were connected to a guy who ran a literal child sex trafficking ring, and then that guy died mysteriously in a jail? Now we just don't talk about it. That was on, I believe, this is the 4th of September, because Yankees, again, they're very weird. They do their dates backwards, of 2021. And it seems, again, a lot of them have been very, very quiet on this issue now. So again, they have nobody to blame but themselves for this. They have nobody to blame but themselves for this. And again, Pam Bondi being very disingenuous and saying we were never going to release child porn, as if that's what people were asking for. No, they wanted the names of people that done these horrific things. We don't need or want to see the horrendous things that happened. Now, the last thing to talk about with regards to this issue, I just want to go through a couple of things that really pissed me off with the British government in particular. There's going to be an episode coming very soon as well, ladies and gentlemen, talking about a lot of the things with regards to the Welsh government coming up, and a couple of other things as well that are not going to make it in today. So stay tuned for that in the next day or two. So here you go. This is the video that Pam Bondi was alluding to when she said she tried to give this really thingy explanation as to why the video was missing this minute. This is the video in question. So this is a video of a cell block, and it has what I believe is either a 46 or 48 on one of the doors. And this is meant to be the cell that Jeffrey Epstein was housed in. Now, I believe some further context of this says it's not actually the cell itself. It's like the entrance to the cell block or something. But this is allegedly the video from right outside Jeffrey Epstein's cell. So obviously people were saying that he was not, that he was suicided. He didn't commit suicide, but he was suicided. Would say that we would see people go into his cell and do, you know, kill him, off him, and then go back out, right? And in theory, this wouldn't take long. This wouldn't take long at all. So on the 9th of August, 2019 is when this video was from. Or it's either that or it's from the 8th of September, but I believe this is the 9th of August. You have here footage from the outside of the cell, and there's a minute missing, as you'll see here now, ladies and gentlemen, as I go over and play it. Oh, it didn't play it. There we go. So the clock is ticking. For those of you who are listening, not watching, so those of you who should have paid attention to the timestamp down in the corner, you would have seen what just happened. You have here the timestamp, and it says 11:58, and I'll read it for you now. It goes 55, 56, 57, 58, and then boom, it goes straight to midnight the next day. So there you go. This is the 9th of August. I'm going to let it play one more time. This is the 9th of August, and then you see it go 56, 57, 58, boom. And then it changes. Only thing is, ladies and gentlemen, whatever Pam Bondi's explanation was going to be as to the video's legitimacy and stuff like that, later articles came out. They said the cameras went down. There was no footage, anything like that. Now they all of a sudden provide camera footage. Interesting. They say there is a list. Now there isn't a list. Very interesting. This is something I believe that was reported, at least it was reported in Wired, for example. This was reported in Wired, that the footage that was quote-unquote raw footage from outside Jeffrey Epstein's cell wasn't in fact raw footage and was spliced together in Adobe Premiere Pro from 2 clips. Apparently saved 4 separate times before being posted online. So I believe this is an extract from the Wired article that somebody has kindly posted, because I'm not going to go pay the Wired subscription to get the full thing. It says here, the United States Department of Justice this week released nearly 11 hours of what it describes as quote-unquote full raw surveillance footage from a camera positioned near Jeffrey Epstein's prison cell the night before he was found dead. The release was intended to address conspiracy theories about Epstein's apparent suicide in federal custody, But instead of putting those suspicions to rest, it may fuel them further, because metadata embedded in the video and analyzed by Wired and independent video forensics experts shows that rather than being a direct export from the prison's surveillance system, the footage was modified, likely using the professional editing tool Adobe Premiere Pro. The file appears to have been assembled from at least 2 source clips, saved multiple times, exported, and then uploaded to the DOJ's website, where it was presented as raw footage. This would be, I can only see how this is a stake in the heart of all of these narratives around Jeffrey Epstein that the recent administration, the Trump administration, has tried to push. It just reeks of continuing the cover-up that, again, those of us that actually got our hopes up with regards to maybe getting a proper answer were just, again, told basically to go fuck ourselves. Basically, no, fuck you, you're not getting an answer. None of this is ever going to come out. And it just reeks of government corruption that we were hoping was going to, we were hoping the swamp was going to be cleaned. You know, drain the swamp. And then we just shown that it's more of the same. Seemingly, it's more of the same. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, I'm wearing this shirt in particular. It just looks like a regular white shirt. But this is emblematic of the problem that we face and the scale of it. You'll see here, if you're looking on the screen, for example, you'll see this here. There we go. 1 Samuel 17 to 45 from the Old Testament. And if I stand up a bit quick. For those of you who are listening, not watching, it's an image of David and Goliath, because that's where this story's from. And I wear this shirt in particular because it's emblematic of the problem that we face, in my opinion, that we are, David, going against this Goliath of government with this corruption and covering up for pedophiles. The text reads, David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. I think it's perfectly emblematic of what we face and what we really need to do. We need to trust in the Lord that this is all going to work out in accordance with his will and his plan. Somehow, some reason, he's permitted this to happen. Whether it's to test how far we'll actually take this issue, whether it's to test how far we'll actually push for the truth and for justice and for good to be done. You know, if we are to actually push it and really get the change that we demand, and actually ensure that, as I said, that justice is done to the evildoers and that the victims are able to then go on knowing that justice has been done. Or again, vengeance is his, remember. One thing we do need to remember, the Lord said, vengeance will be mine, or vengeance is mine. It still doesn't change the fact that this, us turning away from this, is where a lot of things have gone wrong for us, whether it's in our communities or whether it's all of these things. So it's us not adhering to the moral code that then allows evil to flourish. You know? So I think we're in a big fight. Right now, I'm not really sure what we do, really. It's going to take people that are obviously a lot more powerful than me. I'm just a person with a voice and a microphone. That's all I am. Making you guys aware of what's going on. I'm trying to help you keep you guys aware of what's going on. But let's bring it back to problems at home, for example. As we round up today, I want to leave you with some things that were said by our establishment, which is where our focus needs to be. Because ultimately, everything regarding the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, much as we demand justice and stuff like that, because all of us have daughters, you know, or at least we will in the future. Many people have daughters. Anybody that has a daughter or a young female relative or any young relative that got taken advantage of by the Islamic grooming gangs, for example, the Islamic Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. It's a problem that resonates with everyone because of how evil it is. And make no mistake, the establishment is not on our side. I think the American people are learning that a little bit as well. And we certainly should learn that from the remarks that have recently been made by the quote-unquote king of this country, the Grand Mufti, Charles, and Angela Rayner. So I'm going to read Angela Rayner's first, because this is really, really disgusting. So yesterday, Angela Rayner posted about something known as the Srebrenica genocide. Now, I've never heard of this. I've never heard of this before. The Srebrenica genocide, apparently it's the 30th anniversary, where over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were killed in July 1995 by Bosnian Serb forces. A UN-protected safe zone failure later validated by the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, as apparently it was then given the term as a genocide. The event's memory is contested locally. I'm reading this from Grok, by the way. So given that Grok recently had a Grokkenführer moment, which if you've been on X at all recently, you'll see the absolute unhinged mad lad that Grok turned into for a little while. The event's memory is contested locally, with Republika Srpska leaders denying the genocide, while forensic evidence from the Srebrenica Memorial Center continues to identify remains, countering denial with over 6,000 burials since 2003, per the International Commission on Missing Persons. So, Angela Rayner posted this. Today we mark the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide, when over 8,000 predominantly Bosnian Muslim men and boys were brutally murdered. The horrors of Srebrenica remind us why we must remain vigilant against hatred and division. We must never forget. Now you'll notice there the choice of words, ladies and gentlemen. Brutally murdered. Brutally murdered were the terms used. I think you could potentially say, rather accurately, that they were used by the sounds of it, right? However, I just want to go back and find the post a moment, because it's a stark change from how you'll see these people, like Angela Rayner, remember things like the 7/7 attacks. So when it is Bosnian Muslim men and boys, they were brutally murdered. They were brutally murdered. When it is the people that we lost, the British people that were brutally murdered in the 7/7 attacks 20 years ago, they were just lives lost. So this is where you really don't hate your establishment enough, and where it really shows you what they're banking on, where their votes that they are hoping to get are coming from, or where they think that they are coming from, that they will describe an attack on their own people in their own capital city by foreign terrorists simply as lives lost. But they will describe the, again, seemingly a systematic massacre of 8,000 Muslim men and boys. That classes as brutal murder. One doesn't, one does, despite the fact that they were both premeditated, they were both deliberate, and they were both horrendously brutal. So that shows you the kind of two-tier system that we live in, and where the establishment is not on your side. Today we remember the 52 lives lost and hundreds injured in the 7/7 attacks 20 years ago. My heart goes out to the survivors, families, and brave first responders. We honor those lost and stand strong for the values that define our country. Yeah, the kind of things that led to their deaths is what these people stand for. Because like the victims of the grooming gangs, you could argue that they were sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism and diversity as well. Because it all stems back to Blair's open border agenda. And you could even trace it back to Clement Attlee with the Nationality Act and stuff like that. But again, when it's British people that are killed, oh, we're very sorry about the lives lost. When it's Muslims that are killed, brutally murdered. And the King recently made a statement regarding the 7/7 attack. The Grand Mufti of London said that today, as we mark 20 years since the tragic events of the 7th of July 2005, my heartfelt thoughts and special prayers remain with all those whose lives were forever changed on that terrible summer's day. While the horrors will never be forgotten, we may take comfort from the way that such events rally communities together in solidarity, solace, and determination. It is the spirit of unity that has helped London and our nation heal. As we remember those we lost, let us therefore use this 20th anniversary to reaffirm our commitment to building a society where people of all faiths and backgrounds can live together with mutual respect and understanding, and always stand firm against those who would seek to divide us. Like I said, I believe it was in the last episode, I'm sorry, monarchists. It's over. It's over. The King, using the 52 that were brutally murdered by foreign Muslim terrorists to further this multicultural diversity utopian narrative, is not only just disgusting and pissing on their graves, but it is dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. Because it shows weakness. It shows more and more weakness. And that's going to make the people that did the 7/7 attacks more emboldened to do it again. Every time we show weakness, every time we showed we weren't going to stick up for ourselves, every time we showed, for example, that we were going to cower and pander to Muslim child rapists at the expense of keeping those children safe, those people felt more and more emboldened. The things didn't stop. They carried on, they accelerated. Things like this that our king has said here are actively putting more and more people. I'm just going to try and refocus the camera again, 2 seconds. More and more people, just regular people like you and me, in grave danger. And you need to see it as such. The notions of this liberal, multicultural utopia need to be dispensed with. It's going to get us all killed. And our establishment will take joy in that. Because they want less people on the planet anyway. Smaller populations, much easier to control. So like I said, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a fight for our very lives, very survival. This is far greater than any threat we've ever seen before. This is far greater than the threat we faced in World War II. We're on the verge of losing our entire civilization. Because at least in World War II, our government fought for us. At least in World War II, our government fought for us. That we know we could leave, we could go and fight on a foreign battlefield, and at least we know that our government wasn't shepherding in our replacements behind our backs. At least that's the way I understand it. Now, we know that our government is actively trying to ship us away so that they can let foreigners come in and do whatever the fuck they want. so that they can hopefully bank on them come election season. Unless we do something, unless we, in many instances, get more and more people to admit that there's a problem, to admit that this isn't right, to admit there's something wrong. There's something in the water, even if, it's hard to put a label on it. We need to. Otherwise, we are going to be wiped out. We are... It may not seem like it. I think if you live in an area like mine, it may not seem like it. We are on the verge of losing everything. It was never done with a shot. It wasn't done with bombs. In some instances, you could say it was. It was done with systematic betrayal of our government. Us abdicating all responsibility, all notion of virtue, all notion of duty. Deciding we were going to go to sleep. Well, now we really need to wake up. Because we don't have much time left. And that'll do it for today, guys. Hope you had a good, morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. I hope you find this useful more than anything. Not that it's, enjoyable by any means. You take care, and I'll catch up with you next time. Got some more things to go over. And, like I say in that interview, which you should go and listen to next Monday, if we want it, the future does look bright. It looks very bright, promise you that. But we have to be willing to fight for it. You take care, guys. I'll see you next time. Godspeed.